For this first training session, I'm just going to be touching on introduction to research and ethics. And it's going to be very interesting and interactive. So I'll be very, very simple, very interesting as much as possible. Because most of the time people think that research is boring, probably because of how it's being taught. So let's get right into business. What is research basically? I'll send this slide to the group, but it is just a way to investigate, to contribute, or to develop knowledge. If I'm to ask you, um, why is why is why are the young people tend to be more socially inclined in this particular region than this particular region? You would want to inquire, you would want to investigate the reason behind, and there are different research methods. So research is a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute knowledge. You are not just finding existing information or adding to existing information. Most times you are creating new evidence to support a particular problem or to solve a particular problem. And the reason of research, the reason why it is called research is that no, no matter the problem you are going to solve or the research applications that you are going to be doing, it must be reproducible. That's what is written here. The high quality research must be replicable. Someone else can do it and get the same results, and it must be transparent. So it is not a matter of being biased. Now, what are the researcher's mindsets? The first thing is critical thinking. You must question the status quo. It is not, research is not static, it is always dynamic. The world is always evolving. We are coming up with new things. We are being innovative day by day. So even the current truths or the current fact that is accepted today, if there is new evidences or if there are new evidences that this current fact is not necessarily true, that's what we call critical thinking, questioning the present status quo. The next thing is objectivity. So in this particular qualities of a researcher's mindset is very, very important because this is where many researchers get their biases from, or even students that even use AI, to do their research. Research is not objective per se. Um, in what sense? I mean, it's not subjective. It must be objective. So the researcher's mindset must be objective. So you must let the data speak, even if it contradicts your personal opinion. It is not a matter of saying I found out that you know I discovered that, I think, I assume, I presume. That is not research. The researcher's mindset is objective in nature. So instead of saying I'm going to change my wordings. It has been discovered that studies have shown that I'm speaking objectively now. I'm not speaking subjectively. I'm not bringing it to my personal opinion. You have to let the existing data that are out there speak for themselves. The next one is precision. So it might not be all accurate, but we want to get certain facts right. So we aim for what we call statistical significance. That means, are there any supporting evidence that shows that this is true or that shows that this is false? Why, of course, the researcher's mindset must be persistent because it's a long run. It takes guts, it takes grit, it takes discipline, and it takes a lot. It takes, even when the your research question is not being answered, you must have to persist. And that is all about the meaning of research and the researcher's mindset. Next thing we're going to be talking about now is the type of research. There are different type, different classification, different models of classification. But in order to make this particular image of good use to you, I'm going to give an example and then explain from the perspective of these three angles what are the type of research. Let's say, for example, I am I'm doing a research that is studying the use of a new antihypertensive drugs in reducing blood pressure. So I'm saying my research study or my research objectives, or rather my research work, is about a new antihypertensive drug A in reducing blood pressure. In this three category of type of research, I'm looking at, for the application, I'm looking at why am I doing the research? For objectives, how am I going about it? How am I going about it? Don't forget application, why? Like why the research work? Why am I doing the research? For um, objectives, what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals? Why for inquiry, that's the inquiry mode, how are we doing it? So I'm testing my new antihypertensive drug on patients to see if there's a reduction in blood pressure. For the application, which is why are we doing it? It is divided into two. We have pure research and we have the applied research. Pure research is simply to gain knowledge. You just want to gain knowledge. You just want to study, for example, how the new antihypertensive drugs works in the body. You just want to gain knowledge. That's pure research. For applied research, you want to solve a particular problem. You are applying your research work, what you actually studying in order to solve a real life practical problem. So for applied research, the same study subject now, we want to find out if this particular drug can treat hypertension, is very, very effective in reducing blood pressure. That is for application. That is why we are doing it. Now for objectives, which answers the questions, why are we, or rather, what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals? What are we trying to achieve? You can now look at it into descriptive, exploratory, correlational, explanatory. But this is actually interconnected. So I'll look at it like this. Based on our study subjects, right? On new hypertensive drugs in reducing blood pressure. For explanatory, is answering the question, I don't understand the problem yet. I don't get the problem. So I would want to explore. I would want to explore what I don't understand. So I can say, oh, why are patients reacting differently to this drug? I want to explore. I want to do an exploratory research, right? For descriptive, I want to describe. Let me describe what is happening. Let me describe how many patients have side effects. Let me describe what is happening to their blood pressure. Now, for correlation, we are showing a relationship. Are these things related? Is there those um, uh, those related relationship between the patient and the drug? Does age affect or relate to drug response? Why for explanatory, you are just explaining why it is happening. So you're explaining the mechanism of action of the drug, you're explaining the concept. So for objectives, which is what are we trying to do, the research type can be descriptive in nature, exploratory in nature, explanatory or correlational, or they can be a mixture of both. Now, the next category is the inquiry mode. You want to inquire. This is how are we doing it? It answers the question, how are we going to do it? There are of two types. We have the quantitative research and we have the qualitative research. The quantitative research are the from the word quantity. Quantities has to do with numerical terms. They are the numbers. They are the data they are the quantitative data that take on numbers, such as blood pressure reading, their lab value, and so on and so forth, based on our research subject now. New hypertensive drug in patients in reducing blood pressure. While for quantitative research, they deal with qualitative data, the data that does not take on numerical values but categorical values such as the opinions, the experiences, the feelings, basically quality. You get that is like interviewing the patient, how they are feeling. When it comes to behavioral data, that's for qualitative. So that's qualitative research. Or it can be a mixture of both. If you want your data to be very, very strong or your research finding to be very, very comprehensive, right? It can be a mixture of both. A mixture of both is when you are looking at the BP readings and also how the patients are feeling. What are their opinions? What are their experiences during the course of taking these medications? So I've explained the type of research from different perspectives, from why are we doing it? How are we going to go? Like, what are the goals? What are the goals? What are we trying to achieve in objectives? While for inquiry, it is how are we going to do it? And they are interconnected. Now I'm going to be looking at the three pillars of okay. So now I'll be looking at the three pillars of research ethics. I'll be a little bit slower because I guess I'm fast. The three pillars of research ethics. Ethics are rules that guides that guides a method or a protocol. If I'm not to define it in layman language, but these are the three pillars of research ethics based on Bell's Moss report. Over the years, right, people have been doing unauthorized research, experimenting with human beings in an inhumane manner, taking advantage of vulnerable people, beggars, and use them for experiments and different kind of research subject or research study. So these are the three pillars of research ethics. What is right, what is wrong, that is guiding the research work. The first one is the respect for person. That is the principle of autonomy. So your study, if you're using human beings, your study subjects must enter the research by their own free will. It must be voluntary. And they must have adequate information concerning the research, concerning your studies. That is what we call informed consent. They must be informed about what the research is about the risks, about benefits, and they must be also given the right to withdraw from the research study or from the experiment if they want to. So that's the respect for person, that human beings are autonomous, they can make their own decision. The second one is beneficence. It is the rule of do no harm, maximize possible benefits and minimize potential risks, especially when you're dealing with research that are quite invasive. You want to test for a new for a new drug in the market, you want to test a particular product, you want to carry out an invasive research, you must do no harm. That's the principle of beneficence. The third one is the principle of justice. You know, it has to be it has to benefit everybody. It has to be distributed fairly. Most times there are different research studies from the Kanu meningitis trials, from the Tuskegee research of syphilis in Black American, from the during the Nazi um, during the Holocaust, the Nazis, right? There was no justice. So don't test only on poor people to benefit only the rich. It must be equitably distributed, right? Both the poor, the rich, the vulnerable, and everybody must benefit. Most times, based on biases or based on some form of segregation, certain research are being done to a particular race. So that is bridging the code for the principle of justice. For example, certain research can be done on people in Asia and not people in the Americans or people in African continent, the black people. So that is breaching the code of the principle of justice. It should be distributed fairly. Now, what are the informed consent process? I would send a slide, but basically, patients must be told about the possible risk, the purpose, the benefit, that is disclosure. They must understand it in their own language, simple language. You cannot just come to a village and say you want to carry out research and they don't know what you are doing. So you must tell them in their own language. They must be able to comprehend what you told them. And it must be voluntary. They can withdraw from, they can be free to leave anytime. And also it must be documented and signed to committees, which we call the ethics committee, for your research approval. Now, what are some of the research misconduct? So if you are writing your research paper or if you are conducting your own research, you must be um, you must not fabricate data, you must not falsify data, and you must avoid plagiarism. And I'm going to be very practical in this next phase of the training class, right? I'm going to be showing you examples when we get to research paper anatomy. Making up data or results or reporting them, that's fabrication. It doesn't make sense because at the end of the day, your data will not be able to reflect in real life application. You must not manipulate research materials or change data so that you would want to suit it to your own opinion. Remember, I said that research must be objective in nature, not subjective, not I. You are not feeding your opinions. You are building based on facts, based on general agreements. You are speaking as a non-biased researcher, right? Somebody with no conflict of interest. We have plagiarism, using another person's ideas, their process, their result, and what without giving appropriate credit. That is why we cite in our paper. We can say, okay, according to what that organization, this, according to this particular paper, this. Or you can cite them in different formats, in different styles. We are going to be talking about them in our next training. So you must avoid plagiarism by citing or paraphrasing your work. You can put it in your own words. You can also cite your paraphrase sentences or your paraphrase work. You know, there is somebody that has the original idea. You must give that person the credit. Now, looking at the anatomy of the research paper. What is the anatomy of a research paper? Before I speak about the anatomy of the research paper, where do we find scientific paper? Where do we find research paper from? Now, if I'm to say do your research on a particular subject, how do you go about it? Or how do you start getting sourcing scientific paper? Now, I'm going over to my web browser, I'm going over to Chrome. You can see what I wrote here, Google Scholar database. Now, just like you have a library, right? There are there are databases that holds journals together, which um, those journals, those particular journals, now have articles in them. So if I'm looking for scientific work or scientific articles, I'm searching for relevant database. There is ResearchGate, there is PubMed. This is PubMed. There is Google Scholar. Let me click on the link of Google Scholar. There is Google Scholar. There is Copious. There is Web of Science, and there are other specific database that holds a particular kind of research paper. If you are looking for example, if you are looking for um, papers that talks about medicine, PubMed is one of the relevant database that you can find journals, as you can see stated here, online books and scientific articles. Google Scholar encompasses all. ResearchGate, we have Scopius, and we have for pharmacology students, we have the International Journal of Pharmacology. We have different databases for different purposes. We have those that you can look for if you're looking for chemistry inclined subject or chemistry inclined research. Now, because this is just the basics. In our um, next training, we are going to talk about how to search. But let me just search for COVID-19, COVID-19, and then take you to the anatomy of research paper. Then to bring out different research articles, you can filter it for the past 1 year, 5 years. This is not a class for that. But let's see something that is free. Okay, let's open to this one. Yes, and then I'm trying to open a research article. So basically, I've seen the title. Now I've seen the abstract. The abstract is a summary of the entire paper. When you read the abstract, you know what is the introduction, the method, the results, and the likes. But let me go back to my slide. Let's look at the anatomy in brief detail. So we have the IMRaD, which is like the basic thing a scientific paper should contain, which is the introduction. Why does this study matter? What is the gap? So in the introduction, we are looking at introducing the subject. What is the problem in that existing field? What is the gap? What is the question that have not been answered? The existing research gap. The research gap is the um, the problem that you want to solve. So I can say, for example, I'm introducing a research subject that social media is one of the most lucrative um, software to use in order to make money, to learn a skill, to learn courses, and blah 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 blah. And I'm looking at the research problem that the rise of social media among young people is becoming alarming. What is the research gap? The research gap is that there is no particular study that is addressing social media usage. I'm giving as an example now, between the age 13 to 17 among the preteens and their implication in their adult experience. So I've identified the problem, I've identified the gap. My research now is now going to try to fill this research gap. That is what that is when you are looking at your research objectives or your research study, answering a particular question, filling a particular research gap. In our next training of literature review, I would explain this in more detail. You don't want to do what has been done before. You want to add to existing knowledge or create new knowledge. Don't forget that I said in our beginning classes that you are doing research to add to existing knowledge or to create new evidences and set a pace. The next one is the method. This method section tells you how exactly did you carry out your research. I'm not going to go details into this, but just to point out. Right, the next one is the results. What did your data show? So you are presenting your data in figures, in tables, in stats formats. You are doing t-test, chi-square, and all those statistical tests. We have the discussion. What do your results mean in the real world? So you are going to discuss what are your results, what are your findings, and then we have the conclusion and references. What are your final thoughts? And of course, you have to cite your source because you are going to be using already existing literatures, already existing scientific research, right? You must cite your source, you must add your references. Now, this is like a caricature diagram of the research paper. Here we have our title, our author, who are the author affiliated with? Are they affiliated with a school or an institution or a private research organization? We have our abstract, which is a summary of the entire research paper. You know, that is not that should not be more than 250 words. We have our author summary, that one is optional. We have our introduction, a very introduction. We have our materials and methods. We have our findings, our results that has figures, that has tables, that has graph. And we have our discussion where we discuss our findings, discuss our data. We have our conclusion, concluding that this have been done, concluding how we have filled a particular area in the research gap. Then we have our acknowledgement. You want to acknowledge, you want to thank God, you want to acknowledge those that helped you. And we have the author's contribution and the reference. So I'm trying to open an original research paper. I'm trying to open a PDF format so that you can actually see. Let me go on to Google Scholar. Let me type COVID-19. If I can see this should give me a PDF. Sure. So you can see how it is being presented. So I've opened a scientific article. Now you don't just go to AI. AI is going to take from different sources and going to give you a synthesized work. You want to read research from relevant database and you want to open scientific paper. In our next class, I will tell you how you can go about reading your paper, but this is just in an introductory class, you understand? Let's wait for this to load. Okay, so you can see our title, you can see this is our abstract. This is the chief author. The chief author is the first person, while all those persons are the supporting author or the co-author. And if I want to cite this paper, I'm going to cite it like this. Let me open my notes. So let's say I wrote a particular paper and 5 people helped me in writing this paper. I'm going to write my name, David, as the chief author, and et al. Et al means the rest, the remaining, the others. And it is a common practice to utilize your et al. So David et al, I did a study 2022 or 2023. This is how to cite it in APA formats. American Psychological Association styling. There are different styles. There's the Chicago style, there is the Vancouver style, but this is the basics for that is generally acceptable depending on your level. So now let's move over to our research PDF. So we have the abstracts, and then we have the DOI. I'm going to explain that later in our later training. Then we have the introduction. We have some images, some subsections in introduction. I know that at first, you might be like, am I going to read all these things? No, a smart researcher does not read every single thing in the research paper. We are going to talk about that in our later training. Just trying to show you how the research paper is like. This is our conclusion, author contribution, references, and trying to highlight the methods. Just give me a sec. Okay. This should be the findings. Now, depending on the article type, they might not necessarily state method, materials, this or that. But let me try to see if I can open another article that would let me see, that will clearly state that distinction. Some articles just put everything together. Let's see an overview of COVID-19. Some articles put everything together. Some articles just highlight that this is the background, this is the method, and okay, this article is an example. The title is an overview of COVID-19. She is the chief author, the rest is co-author. So if I want to cite this paper, I'm going to cite it as She et al. This is the abstract. Now this is the introduction. This should be the literature review. Hold on. Some paper just put everything together. Some actually, this is chapter 3. This should be the methods. Chapter 3 is always the method, how the research is being carried out. Chapter 4 is the findings. This should be the findings. 4 findings. Chapter 5 should be the discussion. So this is the results in tabular formats, and then we have conclusion, this, recommendations, and the likes. But I'm going to send simple research paper that can clearly distinguish what we are talking about here. So that should be all for the anatomy of the research paper. In our literature review class, I'm going to explain further what each subsection is and how you can be able to read or write a research work. Now we have IRBs, like I said, they are ethics committee. They will give you the ethical approval number before you start your research. We also have the animal section of the IRBs, the animal ethics committee, because if you are working with animals, you need to submit your ethical approval in order to start your research, right? So their job is to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects, and you cannot publish a high impact journal without ethical approval number. It has to be approved, and you have to, the purpose of the review board of the IRBs is to ensure that your work is conducted in an ethical manner. So that brings me to the end of